Yeah, so if you watch really closely, you have to watch closely and you kind of have to know what to look for. But if you watch that video closely, you can see the joint move up and down a little bit as my son is working the wheel back and forth. You can watch the joint kind of move up and down a little bit, and that's a textbook sign that those joints are worn out. And actually it was doing it on both ends. So I thought that the popping I was feeling in the steering wheel was probably the track bar. The track bar looks really good. The problem was that drag link coming off of the steering box, the pitman arm, down toward the spindle on the other side. Like I said, it was worn out on both. It is worn out on both ends. Oh, and I forgot to mention that this is after I asked the dealership to check that out for me when I took delivery of the truck, because on the test drive I noticed it. So right away, as soon as we signed all the papers and I bought the truck, I asked them to send it over to the service department and have them check it out, because I knew something was worn out in the front end. And their response was, we've had 2 different mechanics look at it and they don't see anything wrong. I guess that's par for the course, but I identified myself what's wrong with it, so I'm going to go in there now and specifically tell them what's wrong with it and that I want this specific part replaced. And we'll just go from there and see how that works. And I just looked, and they're about $200 to buy one. I've got a $200 deductible on my extended warranty, so I'm just going to let the dealership do it so I don't have to fool with it. But that should cure the popping in the steering wheel, and if it doesn't, then plan B will be the intermediate shaft. I know a lot of guys have had trouble with the intermediate steering shaft on these F-250s. But it really does look like that my issue is going to be that drag link. So I got to get that done. And for now, I got to play with this Australian Shepherd because he wants me to toss ball with him. But anyhow, at least I figured out what I think the problem is. So it's got to go in for service, and you know, just trying to get some things ironed out. You know, these heavy duty trucks, 80,000 miles on the clock. Who knows what kind of life the truck has lived before I got it. You know, it happens. You got to get stuff lined out, but I'll get it straightened out pretty soon. It's going to be a great truck. I just got to get a few things straightened out. All right, so it's time to continue doing some more maintenance, preventative maintenance on this Super Duty. So I did the front differential, the rear differential, engine oil and oil filter have already been done. Did both of the fuel filters. Greased up the front axle shafts. Had the front end inspected because there's something loose up there, but that's where the truck has been. Took it to the dealership to have them look at it. And they keep saying that they had a couple of mechanics look at it, couldn't find anything wrong with it, which is typically what you hear. But there's definitely something wrong with it. I always grab the wrong ratchet. You got to have 3/8 to do this, not 1/2 inch. I don't know why I can't remember that. So I got to go get my 3/8 size stuff. But anyway, so I've just been kind of going through this truck from front to back, doing all of the maintenance that I can do myself just to take care of the truck. Because these diesels, especially, are super expensive to repair. So the more maintenance you can do, the better off you're going to be. So the only thing I've got left are the transfer case and the transmission. So we'll get to the transmission in just a minute because I found a cool upgrade that didn't cost hardly any money at all for the trans. But let's go ahead and do this transfer case. So like I said, 3/8 inch ratchet, fill plug, drain plug. You guys know the routine. Super easy. Make sure that you take the fill plug out first. That way, you know that you're not going to strand yourself when you go to put fluid back in here and you realize the fill plug is locked up. Now I'm going to try and not make a mess. Sometimes, like when we pulled the fill plug on that F-150, we did the same thing to the F-150 a couple weeks ago. Okay, this one's good. but it was actually overfilled, and when I took the fill plug out, fluid started running out of it. So you gotta watch out for that. But this one appears to be good. Now, whoa, that drain plug was not tight at all. So the thing about this truck, like I said, 81,000 miles. The manual has a couple of different schedules. One of them is for severe service use, and I'm pretty sure it says to change this fluid at 60,000 miles. And that's if, you know, you're doing a lot of towing and hauling, or you're using the truck off-road, or, you know, that kind of thing. You're going to want to do this at 60,000 mile intervals. So, you know, this one's at 80,000, not a big deal, but I am going to go ahead and change it out. Now you can see, this is the Mercon LV transmission fluid, is what this takes. And I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but it has really lost that red coloring that the LV fluid has when it's brand new. This has got some brownish tint to it now, so probably it was a good thing to go ahead and change this. But you're only going to need a couple of quarts, 3 at the most, but I think a couple of quarts will probably do it. I've got 13 quarts on hand, so if I put a couple of them in here, I should still have plenty to do the transmission. So that's the plan anyway. But I like to park the truck on just a little bit of an incline so that you can get more of the fluid to run out. And, you know, this is the easiest fluid change that you'll do on the entire truck. Just let it drip out like that, then we'll put the drain plug back in. Now, when you go to fill this, you got a couple of options here. You can see how this truck has this electronic shift on the fly motor sitting right above the fill port. So that's not going to allow you to get in there with any kind of a bottle. So what I may do, you got a couple of options. Like I said, you can either get a really small funnel with a long neck on it, one that's maybe a little flexible, and try to run the funnel down underneath that motor. But then you've got to come up here and pour the fluid in from the top, or you can get a hand pump and just pump it in, which probably would be the best option, although those hand pumps are really messy. I've never figured out how to use one of those without making a mess. I know they're not really supposed to be messy, but it just seems like you stick that one end down in the bottle, then you start pumping, and next thing you know, one of the tubes comes off and fluid squirts everywhere, or, you know, it comes unscrewed from the bottle and it starts running down the sides of the bottle, then it gets all over your hands, and I mean, it's just inevitable. You're going to end up making a big mess with those hand pumps. But that may still be the best way to go on this transfer case because of where they put this shift on the fly motor. So I'll go get my hand pump out, I guess, and, well, I may go get a funnel and just kind of size it up and see what I think. You know, just kind of hold the funnel up there and look at it. We might try that first. So since this was not very tight, it actually looks like somebody put the thread locker tape on the wrong way, because when you're screwing the bolt back in there, the plug back in, it's supposed to like tighten up that thread locker tape, or the thread sealer tape rather. But instead, if you put it on backwards, it'll just peel off as you screw that in. So I don't know, strange, but there she is. Now all we got to do is figure out how we're going to fill it up. So I will leave the drain pan out here just in case I need somewhere to drain some fluid or something from the new bottles. Let me go get a couple of bottles and a funnel, and we'll see how this is going to best work out. Okay, so I've got this little funnel here that I could put in there, but see, you see the problem? Even though this funnel has a 45-degree cut on the top of it, even still, there's no way to do that because of that motor being in the way. See? So as soon as you start pouring the fluid in the top, it's just going to run right back out on the driveway. You really need this thing like that, and you can't do that because of where they put the motor. That's kind of a bummer. So I guess I really am going to have to resort to a hand pump. Now, the problem with that is that these Mercon LV bottles don't have a standard size hole in the top of them, you know, drain. They are actually a little bit bigger. Let's see if I can find one of them here. Okay, see, so here's the problem is most of your manual hand pumps have a smaller provision here. So I don't think it's going to work. Yeah, I was just kind of looking at it there. So that's smaller. These are actually larger in diameter on the tops of the bottles. So like I said, you can still stick that out down in there and pump the fluid out. That's not so much of a problem, but it's just real hard to get all of the fluid out because you can't like turn the bottle upside down and stuff if you can't screw that on there. So kind of a bummer. So I finally got it to the point where it's running out of the fill port, and so now we can put the fill plug back in and we'll be ready to move on up to the transmission, which actually will probably be just as easy because you can at least fill it through the dipstick. So now I'm ready to move on to the final part of this maintenance catch-up that I'm doing, and that is the transmission. So again, I got 82,000 miles on it now, so it's been a great time to go through the whole truck and do all this maintenance bumper to bumper. Just to recap, I did the front and rear differentials already, did the transfer case, greased up the U-joints on the front axle shaft, did both of the fuel filters. You know, I've just kind of been going through the whole truck and doing all the maintenance that I don't have any history on. And now all that's left is the transmission. So if you're going to do a transmission fluid change on one of these 2019 F-250s, here's what you want to get. So Dorman makes a transmission pan. Here's the part number on it. And the cool thing about it is it has a drain plug on it. So apparently, from what I understand, these F-250 Super Duties came with a drain plug like this from the factory through the 2017 model year. From what I understand, sometime in 2018, they got rid of this drain bolt on the pan. Why? I don't know. Maybe they're just trying to save a few cents per truck. I don't know. But it sure is super convenient to have one of these, because the cool thing about these trucks is they do have a real dipstick. So if you've got a drain bolt on your pan and you've got a real dipstick under the hood, it makes it really, really convenient in the future to do fluid changes. So with 80,000 on the clock, I'm going to go ahead and change the filter while I'm in there. I got to swap out the pans anyway, right? So might as well change the filter while I'm in there. There's the part number on that. And you're going to need a whole case of Mercon LV fluid. The gasket, from what I understand, is reusable. So I'm just going to clean that up and reuse it. And obviously you got a whole bunch of bolts around here. So as always, a nice electric ratchet is going to make the job a lot faster. So it should be pretty straightforward. This is going to be a super messy job. Transfer case ended up being messy. This is going to be even worse. So I got my rubber gloves out or latex gloves, whatever, to try and keep some of it off my hands. I'm probably going to need to go get more blue shop towels. I don't think this little roll right here is going to do it. Anyway, without further ado, that's the stuff we're going to use, and this will really make the truck happy, because like I said, I don't know the history on the transmission. These torque shift transmissions are great transmissions, very durable, but you definitely want to take care of them. All right, so chances are that this drain pan right here is probably not going to be big enough. I think this is an 8-quart pan. And honestly, I believe this torque shift transmission has more than 8 quarts laying in the pan here. I don't know. We'll find out here in just a moment. But anyhow, probably going to wish that I had a bigger pan. which is one of the reasons I decided to do this out in my gravel driveway in case, you know, I have an overflow here, which I'm pretty sure that I might. But anyway, so let's see what size these are going to be. Looks like about a 5/16. 5/16 is what you're going to need for all of these bolts. Now, I am going to start at the rear and just start zipping these out. Try to be careful not to let them fall into your drain pan. It says Torque Shift 6 made in USA on the pan. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Now when we get in here, I'm using my little 1/4 inch stuff, but I think, because I've watched some videos on this, I think the filter is going to have a larger bolt securing it. And it's already starting to drip. So I'm going to get my pan in position here. Pretty interesting how it started to drip like that, because most of these transmissions that I've done before, you can take almost all of the bolts out and it won't drip. You know, usually that gasket makes a pretty good seal, and when the pan has been on there for years, you know, it ends up just really sealing off well. So sometimes you have to kind of do them like a differential inspection cover, where you stick a screwdriver in there and pry on it a little bit to get it to come off. But apparently that's not going to be the case with this one, because it's already dripping. So I'm going to go ahead and let this drip for a minute, and then I'm going to finish zipping these out. I'll pause the video right here and come back once I get this off, because this part is super straightforward. And we'll take a look on the inside of the transmission and show you what the filter looks like. Be back in a minute. All right, now that I have the pan unbolted and out of the way, you can see the reusable gasket is still stuck onto the transmission. I don't see any reason to move it, so I'm just going to gently wipe it down and try to leave it in place. You can see where your dipstick comes down into your pan to read your fluid level. And obviously here's the filter. Now there's one bolt right here, and for some reason, there we go. I don't have very good light under here this morning, but there's one bolt right here you're going to have to take out that secures the filter up in there. And I'm glad to see that, because on a lot of transmissions I've been in, there is no bolt to hold the filter on. The filter just kind of has a compression fit up into the transmission body, and you just kind of push it up in there and hope it stays while you put the pan back on. So nice to see that this one at least has a bolt to retain it. So what I'm going to do now is just take that bolt out, slide the transmission filter down, make sure that the seal on there comes out with it, and then we'll put the new filter back in same way, and then we'll bolt the new pan on, and should be good to go. Start going up there and filling it from the top. You can see that the new pan is exactly like the old pan, minus the fact that it has an awesome drain plug in it. But one thing you do want to do is take your magnet out. So you want to get the magnet out of your old pan. You can see there's a little bit of sludge on there. See that? So that's what 81,000 miles of use will do. So we're going to clean the sludge and metal particulate off of this magnet real well and dry it, and then we're going to stick it right back here where it was on the new pan. But other than that, this should be a direct fit, and it should be a pretty nice upgrade. Stand corrected on the transmission filter. As you can see, it actually has 3 bolts holding it in. One in the front and one on each side. And they are 5/16, so they're the same size as the pan bolts. And when I took these 3 bolts out of the filter, I noticed that all 3 of them were different lengths. So make sure you keep that straight. and don't put the wrong ones in the wrong places, because you could cause some damage to the internal parts of your transmission. So like I said, when you take these bolts out, all the pan bolts look the same, but these did not. So when you take the filter bolts out, keep them separated and keep them in order. So now that I've got the new filter in, got the 3 bolts that secure the filter in the correct orientation. One of them was long and 2 of them ended up actually being the same length. So I got that done. Now the new pan is bolted on. The service manual says to tighten those pan bolts at 80 inch-pounds. I've seen where some of your aftermarket pans tell you to tighten them to 100 inch-pounds. As long as you're somewhere in that ballpark, you're probably not going to have problems. But do go around and torque those in the correct fashion. You can look this up online and see how you're supposed to do it, kind of in a, crisscross pattern. But torque them down to the correct value, because if you under torque them or if you over torque them, you can cause this to leak. And when I got all that done, I did just check the drain bolt just to make sure that it was tight from manufacturing, and it is. So now everything is done under the truck, and now we can do everything we need to do filling it from under the hood the way it's supposed to be. Another good bit of news is that it ended up that my pan was plenty. I can't remember if it's an 8-quart pan or a 12-quart pan, drain pan here. I can't remember, but in any case, I was afraid that I wasn't going to have enough capacity, because this torque shift transmission holds a lot of fluid, even there in the transmission pan. But it held just fine. I've got plenty of space there. I did make a boo-boo though. I accidentally dropped the old filter down in there. Yuck. Like I was saying, these 6R140 trucks are awesome because they have a real tried and true dipstick here, the way that they should. But as you can see, it comes out at almost a perpendicular angle to the ground. So that makes it a little bit more interesting. I don't think you're going to be able to use just a normal funnel. So again, I've got my funnel here that has like a 45-degree cut on it. I could stick that in there and maybe use that, but it looks like that might even be tricky. So I also have one of these funnels that's flexible on the end, and I think that's what I'm going to do, because then you can easily hold it up like this if you wanted to. This thing's got a hole in it. You could even put a string in there and tie it to something on the hood and hold it up like this so that you have both hands free while you're putting the fluid in. So anyway, you're going to want some kind of a special funnel, because if you put a normal funnel on here, you're going to get fluid all over your engine compartment. From what I understand, there were a couple of different styles of dipsticks used on these transmissions, and it may depend on model year, I don't know. I'll try and get the camera to focus in here so that you can see this. So here's your safe zone. Okay, and the dipstick tells you to check it hot. But here's the thing, it's late summer in Kentucky. It's very hot outside. We've had temperatures in the 90s lately. So it's not really, in this case, it's not really necessary to start the truck and run the transmission to try and bring it up to any kind of particular temperature. So what I'm going to do is, man, this camera is just not being cooperative today. But anyhow, I'm going to fill it until it's at the very bottom of the safe zone. Okay, so basically the fluid is at ambient temperature, which is around 90 degrees. So if I fill it to the bottom of the safe zone, then when the transmission's at normal operating temperature, which is about 190 degrees, it'll end up being in the safe zone, if that makes any sense. So you can fill it cold, so to speak, even though it's not cold out here, to the bottom of this, and then that'll give you a real good start. Of course, you want to start the engine and shift through the gears and all that to do a final check on it, but that will give you a real good start on how much you actually need to put in here to begin with. And from what I've seen, there's some other videos online that kind of show this process. It looks like you're going to want about 8 quarts to start with, and then you're going to maybe add a little more to fine tune it. So I'm going to go ahead and put 8 of these in here. And like I said, we'll go from there and just kind of see how much more I'm going to need. Now this one has a little bit gone out of it because I used a little bit of this in my transfer case. So I'm going to have to mentally keep track of that. But look how nice and red that is. The old fluid, I'll show you that again here in a minute. It definitely was dark and it definitely had contaminant in it. And you could see that also from the fact that the magnet was covered in metallic sludge. So yeah, I'll be back in a minute. I'm going to put 8 of these in here. Then we'll do a fluid level check and see where it's at cold, so to speak, and kind of go from there. So I decided to go ahead and hang my funnel up with a bungee cord because it does just make it so much easier. So I've got 5 quarts in there, and just for kicks and giggles, I just put the dipstick in to check, and it came up to the part where it says add. So we're getting close. This is number 6 right here. And so it looks like probably that's about right, around 8 quarts. I think I was talking about 8 quarts to start with. That's probably going to be about right. And then, like I said, you know, it's a hot day, so that should bring it right up to the bottom of the safe zone. And that's where we want to be, because I'm figuring that once I start the truck and run it through the gears and the fluid starts to heat up and expand, that will end up putting it right there in the safe zone where we want it to be. So as far as cost, while I'm doing this, let's talk about how much this costs. So I paid about $100 for this case of Mercon LV. This stuff is not cheap, but if you go on Amazon or eBay or someplace like that, usually you can find a pretty decent deal on an entire case of this stuff. And a case of it is 12 quarts, I believe. So you can get a case of this fluid for around $100. Honestly, I can't remember exactly what I paid for the transmission filter, but it was somewhere in the ballpark of 30 bucks. There are a couple of different ones, and I showed you the part number on the one that I got. That's the one that you want. There's another one that apparently was for the older 6R100 transmission. So make sure you're getting the one that I showed you earlier in this video, because it's for the 6R140. This is number 7. Trying to keep track of how many I'm putting in here. This is number 7. So anyway, that's about 130 bucks. And then that pan, the Dorman pan with the drain plug, was 30 bucks. So that's 160 bucks. So then you got Uncle Sam's portion. So let's just call it $1.75. You know, about 175 bucks is what it's going to cost me to do this. And the thing about it is, I know it was done correctly. You know, the filter was changed. I know what fluid went back in it. You know, everything that happened to the transmission on this truck today, I know because I did it myself, right? I'm figuring that if you go to a shop, especially if you go to a dealership and ask them to do a transmission fluid change, they're going to charge you more money, and they probably won't change the filter unless you specifically ask them to. A lot of the time, what they like to do is hook it to the transfer machines. They used to have flush machines, which generated some pressure, and that turned out to be a bad thing for transmissions. So now I think they just use transfer machines, where the machine just, you know, basically duplicates the function of the transmission pump. So there's no extra pressure going through the lines. It just cycles fluid through. You know, so usually that's how they do it. So you still got that dirty transmission filter in there. That's the disadvantage of it. And like I said, it's probably more expensive. So this way, you know, you save some money and you know it was done correctly. And since we have that drain bolt down there, we can drive the truck for another 30,000 miles and then drain it and fill it again to get more of the old fluid out. You know, it's going to be real easy from this point on to drain the old fluid out and put fresh fluid in it. So like I said, you know, you can do it every 30,000, every 60,000, whatever tickles you, but it's just going to be a lot easier to do from now on. All right, so that was number 7. I'm going to put one more quart in here, and then I will start the truck up and we'll do a final check on it. But that's basically all there is to it, guys. It's I guess you can use an 8mm. I used a 5/16 socket. It doesn't really matter. But some small tools to get those little screws out of the pan and out of the filter. And then the parts that I showed you. And you can do this. I've probably got maybe an hour and a half invested in this. And a lot of that was trying to shoot video for YouTube. So if you weren't trying to do a YouTube video, you could probably do it in under an hour. So that's the way to go. Especially if you've got a 19, maybe even an 18 that doesn't have that drain bolt on the pan. That is going to be really nice in the future. I probably will just keep up on this every 60,000 miles at this point. You know, I know the manual says you can go 150 or whatever, but that's certain conditions, you know. If you look at what it calls for the severe duty schedule, you know, if you're in an off-road environment, a dusty environment, you tow a lot, whatever the case might be, which I kind of fall into that because I'm in a dirty environment out here on these gravel roads, and I do tow from time to time. It says 60,000 miles on that one, so I'll probably just do that, especially now that it's so easy. So, another project done. Thumbs up. By the way, I was going to show you what this old fluid looked like. So you saw how cherry red the fresh Mercon LV is, and this is with about 80,000 miles on it. Of course, there's a lot of reflection down here because of the daylight and everything, but you can just see how dark and nasty that stuff is. You know, and just from temperature cycles and things, it'll change color a little bit. But this fluid actually looks really nasty. So in my opinion, it definitely needed to be changed. So I just took out the MAP sensor, manifold absolute pressure. And you wouldn't believe how dirty this thing was. This entire orifice right here was completely full of soot. You couldn't even see down in there. So I cleaned all that out with some cleaner, trying to wipe it all down. And then I guess I'll just reinstall it. I mean, I haven't noticed any problems from this, but it can't be good to have that thing completely plugged up like that. Well, that feels good. It's like I always say, guys, you know, when you do your own maintenance and service on your truck, it kind of gives you a feeling of accomplishment. You know, it's just something about being a guy, I guess. It feels good to know that, hey, I did that, you know. So, you know, and that should really help this truck to last for a long time. If you read online, there's countless Super Duties like this that have 300,000 or 400,000 miles on them. So, you know, I'm not going to be super hard on this truck. So if I take care of it and do this maintenance, I figure it'll last me forever, which is what I'm hoping for. But anyway, so that's pretty much going to finish up all the major maintenance and service on this truck. All of the major fluids are done. And I think it's good to go for a long time now. I got to get that front drag link in the steering replaced before it totally fails on me. It's obviously just going to get worse with time. So got that on the schedule. Going to let the dealership handle that for me. Get an OE piece put back in there. And I just don't really want to fool with it, to be completely honest about it. Some of the suspension components on this truck have some really big hardware. And a lot of torque. So you're going to need some big tools to get that stuff out of there. So I'll just let them handle that. And then it should be ready to rock. And I got it all done before winter, which is the really awesome thing, because I hate it when it's 10 degrees outside and I have to go out and lay on my back and do something like this out in the cold. You got all those clothes on and everything, and you're not as mobile, and your face feels like it's about to freeze off. You can't feel your fingers. You're trying to get the bolts out, and it's a pain. So I'm glad I got all this done in the summertime too. But so anyway, I guess that's about all I got for now. I appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully this will help somebody out. And we'll see how the Super Duty does. Next weekend is when we're going camping. Going to hook to that big enclosed trailer, and we're just going to see how it handles it. I mean, I'm sure it'll be fine, but it's going to be interesting to see how it does compared to the Ram. You know, how much better is it? You know, we'll see. But it's good to have all this done. All right, guys, we'll talk to you later. Have a good weekend.